Is Van Helsing underrated? Van Helsing is a third-person action game developed by Sapphire and based off the 2004 film of the same name. It was released for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, but not the GameCube, and like usual, I'm playing the Xbox version. Being a licensed movie game, which were sometimes awesome but usually not, and being developed by a company who was often stuck making watered-down handheld titles for the Game Boy Color, I went into Van Helsing with fairly low expectations. I've also never seen the Van Helsing film, and it wasn't exactly critically acclaimed. Van Helsing the video game is often noted for being a rip-off of Devil May Cry, a game I have yet to play, and should probably have played first. Finally, Van Helsing was met with mixed reviews, though user reviews tended to be far more positive, so which is it? Let's dive in. Van Helsing's opening cinematic outlines the plot. There's a guy in a trench coat, a woman chained up in a lab, and a doctor consuming some sort of elixir, turning him into a monster, and that's it. After starting the game, the plot jumps ahead 3 years in Paris, France. The protagonist, Van Helsing, enters the Notre Dame Cathedral and is greeted by Dr. Jekyll, who refers to himself as Mr. Hyde. The opening level acts as a tutorial, getting you familiar with the game's core mechanics. Basically, Van Helsing has 2 types of weapons, melee and guns. Van Helsing also has a grappling hook, used for traversing over large openings or up walls. Finally, you can jump and double jump. Scattered about the levels are different glyphs, green acting as currency, red refilling health, and blue, which refill or upgrade your life and ammo bars. After learning the ropes, the game presents the first boss, Mr. Hyde. Here, you'll learn the main combat elements. Holding the right trigger on the Xbox controller will have you auto-aim towards the nearest target. While in the auto-aim mode, you press the jump button to lunge forward, backwards, or from side to side. The auto-aim is required for most combat situations, and the dodging is necessary for boss encounters and some of the more challenging enemies in the later stages. After defeating Mr. Hyde, a series of in-game cutscenes play out, showing Van Helsing cutting off Mr. Hyde's arm, which is pretty awesome, as well as the final demise of the character. Next, we take a train ride to Transylvania, where we are instructed to assist the last remaining member of the cursed Valerius family in taking down Count Dracula. It seems in order for Anna's family to be allowed into heaven, Dracula must be defeated to break the curse placed upon the family. Once in Transylvania, we must find the village fountain, which will set us on a crash course for Dracula himself. A few new gameplay elements are also introduced, including the ability to smash certain objects like crates and barrels, and the alternate ammo concept is presented. Normally, your melee and long-range weapons have unlimited ammo. However, by pressing the left trigger, you gain access to a more powerful alternate attack, which is not unlimited. The blue bar at the top will deplete when engaged and refill when using normal attacks. Combos are also explained, with the game encouraging different button presses to have Van Helsing perform different melee attacks. While the pistols and blades you start with have the alternate ammo modes from the get-go, future weapons are handled a bit differently. About midway through this first mission, you find a shotgun. However, its alternate ammo mode is unlocked later on. Speaking of shotgun, Van Helsing does a great job guiding you forward through the complex levels without being confusing. You can't progress through this level without nabbing the shotgun, because the shotgun is used to blast through this door, allowing progress. So, while we're on mission 1, let's talk about a few of my main gripes with Van Helsing. First, the camera is static and you have absolutely no control over it. While this eliminates the camera getting stuck on things, it also creates awkward moments where you are shooting at enemies you can't see. Van Helsing does a good job with visual and audio cues letting you know something is happening, but it looks and feels goofy. The camera will also jump in certain areas. This means the character is now facing a different direction, and it can take a few moments to regain your bearings. Sometimes continuing to hold the same direction will keep you on the same trajectory. Other times the controls adjust to the new perspective, causing you to go the wrong way. It's a touch sloppy. There is also yet another move you can perform, a finishing move. If you kill 5 enemies before the timer in the corner expires, you fill a canister and can then perform a finishing move by pressing the black button. This instantly kills whatever enemy you attack, besides bosses. It's a neat addition, but is something I almost never used in practice. So, after using the shotgun to blast through a door, we arrive at the village fountain, where a robed man is waiting to ambush Van Helsing. A boss battle ensues, and this works just like the first. Lock in on the enemy, dodge attacks, and shoot. Upon defeat, this mysterious man escapes, and the level is over. Between missions, you can spend some of the currency collected during the levels to buy new moves, expand your alternate ammo and life bars, in addition to buying ammo and life replenishers. In Mission 2, we are instructed to make our way to the Vesseria Church. Right away, a very minor puzzle element is presented, using your grappling hook to lower a bridge, but after this, it's back to hacking and shooting. While the basic skeletons are easy enough to take down with the shotgun or your melee weapon, some gargoyles come to life, presenting some airborne foes. This is where a bit of strategy comes into play. While I'm foolishly blasting away with my shotgun, I probably should equip the pistols, which have greater accuracy at range. Most flying enemies will also dive bomb you, meaning dodging is a must. Failing to have a sound strategic approach will result in death. I'm not saying this is rocket science or deep gameplay, but I do appreciate how Van Helsing wants you to experiment with weapons and attacks, rewarding you for using your noodle. After arriving at the church, we catch up with Anna, surrounded by some thirsty vampires, and a boss fight ensues. After defeating two of them, the third reveals herself as a demon, and a second fight ensues. Moments like these are where those life replenishers can really come in handy, either by finding them in the levels or purchasing them between missions. Again, while item management isn't a focus of the game by any stretch, it always feels nice to have something in reserve when things don't exactly go your way. Upon defeat, we see another cool cutscene with Van Helsing impaling the demon with a cross, and the story progresses. Anna is thankfully safe and informs us her brother is still alive, looking for a way to destroy Dracula and break their family's curse. Unfortunately, he was bitten by a werewolf. Mission 3, however, opens with orders to take down Igor, someone who has been tormenting Anna and her family. Stuck in a library, the game tells us something is hidden in the books, and meleeing them will reveal a secret passage to keep the adventure moving. While not the first secret in Van Helsing, now is a good time to talk about the bonus cheats. Hidden behind this wall is a white glyph, enabling a cheat accessed from the inventory menu. These are completely optional, but do add some replay value, encouraging repeat playthroughs for the completionist types. This one enables color body, which does exactly like what it sounds like it does. A third projectile weapon is also introduced, the crossbow. In addition to doing more damage, the crossbow can also be used as a key of sorts to unlock the next area of the game. Again, I like how Van Helsing uses elements like this to prevent you from progressing to the next area without grabbing the appropriate item. After knocking down a statue, forming a bridge, we make our way to the game's next boss. After one of Anna's relatives, who can't make it to heaven, starts talking, Igor reveals himself, and it's time for a fight. After taking him down, he vanishes, and a werewolf is seen howling in the background, presumably Anna's brother. Then it's off to Mission 4, where we hunt down said werewolf. It is here where I discovered yet another secret offered in Van Helsing: eggs. This one is hidden in a well. It's not an obvious location, and I even walked right past it in a previous level without even noticing it. Yeah, Van Helsing likes to reuse locations as the adventure unfolds. I'm not sure if the movie did backtracking like this, but I'm never a fan of reusing game assets. Sure, the time of day might be different and more difficult enemies inhabit the areas, but we are already dealing with what is an admittedly repetitive gameplay concept, and stuff like this doesn't help. After traversing back through Vesseria with mini battles against the werewolf, even one at the village fountain, we fight the werewolf a final time. After defeat, he transforms back into human form, Anna's brother Valken. The camera pans to Dracula's castle, and then Valken transforms back into a werewolf. Right before Van Helsing delivers the finishing bullet, Anna knocks his arm out of the way, and the werewolf runs off. Anna informs us Dracula has the cure for her brother, and we continue on our quest to take down the Count. But the Mission 5 briefing has us headed to Castle Frankenstein, not Dracula's castle. On the way, there is a spot to use that egg we found in Mission 4. This warps us to a bonus area with secret challenges. The one I unlocked was a time attack, which I promptly failed. I didn't find any more eggs on my adventure, and I'm not sure what is unlocked, but these don't seem to affect the ending of the game. While Van Helsing seems to want to include puzzles into the gameplay, key triggers always have a glow around them, making it obvious you must do something. Again, we must use the crossbow to open up a door in another area of the castle. And in the other area is the alternate shotgun ammo, which is a sweet upgrade to an already fantastic close-range weapon. I must also note the difficulty is really starting to ramp up. While these short dudes are easy to take down, they come in massive numbers and like to charge at you. If you time a shotgun blast or a melee attack just right, you can cancel out their attack. If you don't time it right, it can be easy to quickly get swarmed and take some massive damage. Again, I must note there is some strategy involved, and careless play will result in plenty of deaths. On the flip side, the save system is pretty seamless. You'll usually restart in the same room you died in, and you'll rarely lose more than a couple of minutes of progress when you do die. Since you restart in the same room, you can try a new strategy right where you left off, and you are not forced to play through sections of the game you were already successful in. With the alternate shotgun ammo, we can now just bust through this door and make our way forwards through Castle Frankenstein. While it's rarely a problem, Mission 5 has a few of those awkward camera moments where you can't see what you are firing at, and unlike previous instances of this occurrence, the enemies are actually shooting at you, meaning you're likely going to be receiving damage you couldn't possibly avoid. Maybe I should have gotten in closer and used melee attacks, allowing the camera to move, but Van Helsing gives you a ton of flexibility in how you want to take down foes, so it feels odd when this flexibility is hampered by a static camera. Next, we also gain another ranged weapon in the form of an energy gun. This, of course, means some gimmick requiring this weapon can't be far away, and it isn't. The energy gun is used to fire up Frankenstein's generator, which opens up another section of the castle. Waiting for us is Anna's brother Valken, who is tied up, and then Dracula reveals himself. He calls Van Helsing Gabriel, confusing Van Helsing, and hints it was him who caused this whole mess to begin with. After the chatter, the boss fight begins. While the boss fights up to this point have been mostly the same, mixing in dodging and shooting, Dracula adds a new wrinkle, requiring you to jump one of his attacks. As the jump button is the same button used for dodging, it can be tough to wrap your brain around letting off the auto-aim trigger before pressing the jump button. It isn't the most intuitive thing in the world, if I'm honest, and it definitely took a while for the muscle memory to set in. I'm not saying the controls are complicated, but sometimes less is more. Perhaps this is why I rarely ever use the finishing move learned back in Mission 1. After defeat, Dracula drops some more vague hints about Van Helsing's origins before sending some demons to dispatch him from Castle Frankenstein. Mission 6 begins in the caves under Castle Frankenstein. The change in scenery is nice, with new demonic enemies, plenty of fog, and a reliance on the grappling gimmick. While the core mechanics of the game remain the same, dodge, melee, and shoot, the vertical-oriented gameplay does keep the game from feeling stale as we reach the halfway point. After finding the alternate ammunition for the crossbow, we make our way to Frankenstein's monster. Van Helsing befriends the monster, who reveals Dracula is trying to revive the dead using Frankenstein's machine, which explains why Dracula was in Castle Frankenstein. During a fireside chat, the werewolf runs past and Frankenstein's monster loses it. Worried Dracula will find his secret lair. Mission 7 has us make our way from the caves and return to Castle Frankenstein. See what they did there? Along the way, we discover a second melee weapon, some swords. These things are pretty awesome and make quick work of most enemies, even flying ones. This shift in focus from shooting enemies to slashing them is another welcome change of pace. I also discovered another cheat glyph, Sick Player. Yep. After shutting off this obnoxious cheat, we have our final battle with Anna's werewolf brother, and we finally take him out once and for all. After this, we continue working our way up the castle, laying waste to everything in sight with the awesome swords, only to discover Dracula has kidnapped Anna. After another boss fight with the Count, a cutscene is shown where Frankenstein's monster drops some boulders on Dracula before he is able to finish Van Helsing. I guess these two really did bond during their fireside chat. With all of the magical blasts going on, it seems Castle Frankenstein is no longer stable and we have to escape in Mission 8. As we make our way down and out, we find the alternate ammunition for the electric gun and finally get the hell out of the crumbling building. The boss battle here is some statues. I just love how everything gets bigger and harder as the game progresses, and these statues are formidable foes, dealing massive damage and being tough to take down. Mission 9 finally has us make our way towards Dracula's castle. Van Helsing and Anna grab some horses with stagecoaches and head towards their goal. Unfortunately, a pair of demons who are not happy with you taking out MARISHKA back in Mission 2 launch an assault. While not a boss battle, these two demons sure play like one, and this is perhaps the coolest encounter found in the entire game. You really have to pay attention, using your dodging maneuvers to avoid their attacks, and then jump from the stagecoach to the horses when they either freeze or set blaze to the stagecoach itself. It's an awesome example of pattern recognition, and these demons are a far more satisfying challenge than some of the weaker encounters in the first half of the game. And then out of nowhere, Anna's brother Velkin reappears. I guess he's not dead after all. After defeating him for the umpteenth time, he instructs us to find the hunchback and then make our way to Dracula's castle. And right before he dies, he turns into a werewolf and bites Van Helsing, passing on the werewolf's curse. Van Helsing then lays waste to him yet again, presumably for the last time, for real this time. Mission 10 informs us to locate Igor, the hunchback, as he holds the key to Dracula's castle. After a few minutes of traveling through the woods, obtaining the alternate ammunition upgrade for the swords, we return right back to the ruins where we found Igor the first time. Igor advises he doesn't wish to reveal the portal to his master, and of course a fight ensues. This fight seems impossible at first, until I realized something I hadn't noticed the first time. You can climb up the walls and avoid all the crap happening on the ground level. After figuring out this little strategy, this fight is a cakewalk. The ghost reveals the location of the portal to Dracula's castle, and we are off to the final 2 levels in our adventure. Inside Dracula's castle, we run into Anna, who has a few interesting theories regarding the final events of her brother. As these are key to the game's conclusion, I'll save those theories for the spoiler section. Anyway, Van Helsing continues his pursuit to find Dracula, and the hordes of enemies are really starting to get thick. Seriously, there must be hundreds of enemies here, and half of them are chucking axes at you, meaning you'll either have to run in with your swords and wreak havoc, or stand back and shoot arrows. In either case, clearing this massive horde leads us to the final weapon in the game, a Gatling gun. And then we jump to an elevator as we make our way towards our nemesis. Again, the scenery changes as we seem to be getting closer to Dracula's lair. The enemies are also getting more elaborate, with electrical and magical attacks quickly laying waste to our hero. At the end of Mission 11 is the only frustrating section in the entirety of Van Helsing. At the beginning of the review, I mentioned some issues with the controls and their orientation when the camera jumps as you make your way through the village. For a vast majority of the game, this rarely comes up, and when it does, it's never a real problem, just a minor annoyance at the very worst. However, those issues carry over into this boss fight. I swear to God, Van Helsing's controls just change for no reason in this area. The camera never switches either, it just pans. Still, Van Helsing does not seem to dodge in the direction I'm holding the joystick. This creates awkward moments where you get stuck on a wall or move backwards instead of to the side. The demon's attacks are absolutely brutal as well, and these little control glitches make for a miserable experience. I spent a good hour on this boss, and finally, with a little luck, was able to not get stuck on a wall, as well as encounter some of the easiest attack patterns to dodge and prevail. Even still, I barely made it, with just a pixel of life left when I finally took her down. This is the only section in the entire game where the controls seem to glitch up, and Van Helsing doesn't move in the desired direction. It almost feels like it randomly reverts to tank controls or something. Needless to say, it's maddening and easily the lowest point in the entire adventure. This of course brings us to the final mission, Dracula's demise. While winding your way up the tower, you'll locate the ammo upgrade for the Gatling gun, and that's it, just some more stairs leading up to the final boss in the game. Alright, before the final boss, we must first rescue Frankenstein's monster from the roof of the complex. Van Helsing orders him to find Anna, and we just have a few sections to go. Thankfully, you can just skip through all of the enemies here. There are a ton of bats, but you can just ignore them. Same with this final tower section, just jump down the center rather than bothering with the stairs. After beating mission 11, I also bought 3 life replenishers, assuming the final boss fight would be another nightmare, but after Dracula turns into a demon, this is a pretty standard fight. Just use the Gatling gun, replenish your health when it gets low, and the fight is over in just a couple of minutes. It's a bit anticlimactic in a way, but after the hell of the mission 11 boss, I'm not going to complain. So let's wrap up with the rest of the plot. After taking down Dracula in his demon form, he returns to his vampire form. Van Helsing uses Dracula's spear and stabs him with it, but this doesn't kill him. As the clock strikes midnight, Van Helsing transforms into a werewolf and finally ends Dracula, which is every bit as awesome as it sounds. You see, in a cutscene earlier, Anna mentions her brother Valken must have bitten Van Helsing for a reason, and this premonition turned out to be true. Without the werewolf's curse, Van Helsing would have been unable to take down Dracula. While the final attack is happening, Frankenstein's monster and Anna arrive with the antidote. While administering the cure, Van Helsing unfortunately bites her, ending her life. Of course, with Dracula dead, the curse Anna's family has been under, preventing her family from going to heaven for 450 years, has been lifted, so all is well after all. It's an awesome ending to the story and ties all of the loose ends together, though I'm still not sure why Anna is dead instead of cursed, nor do I understand Van Helsing's forgotten past, but whatever. After these events, the game comes to a close and the credits roll. Graphically, Van Helsing is a good-looking game. The main characters as well as the enemies all move with grace, enhancing the stylized violence, helping the game age reasonably well. The facial features feel a bit more dated, with stiff movements and a general lack of emotion, but they work well enough and never distract from the story. The environments are also nice looking, with decent texture work on both indoor and outdoor environments. While the game doesn't take advantage of some of the Xbox's more advanced shading effects, the designers did manage to create an atmospheric world that feels real enough. That isn't to say there aren't some effects, however. Fog is prevalent throughout a majority of the adventure, really aiding to the moody atmosphere, and the designers did an excellent job keeping things dark while retaining a high level of detail. There's also plenty of motion blur and even some heatwave effects. While Van Helsing isn't a visual marvel by any stretch, what it lacks technically, it more than makes up for artistically. The frame rate is mostly solid as well, staying at a silky smooth 60 frames per second in some areas, and dropping to a reasonable 30 frames per second when the action gets thick. Perhaps most impressive of all is the sound design. For one, the voice acting is excellent. It's awesome hearing Hugh Jackman through the entire adventure, and his excellent delivery really helps elevate the cutscenes into something quite enjoyable. The soundtrack is also awesome. The tracks do a wonderful job capturing the mood of each area, from just wind to a full-on orchestra during battles. The haunting music blends perfectly with the graphics, adding to the overall presentation. This of course brings us back to the question asked at the beginning of the video: is Van Helsing underrated? First, I must admit Van Helsing isn't perfect. The static camera doesn't always work, putting enemies and even bosses off screen. The controls not always acting consistent to camera jumps can also be jarring. Neither of these issues creeps up all that often, but often enough to notice. I also find the controls to be too confusing. You seriously have to use all 6 face buttons on the Xbox controller, including the black button for finishing moves, the white button to change weapons, the left trigger to enable your alternate attacks, and the right button for auto aim. There are times when you are pressing 3 buttons at the same time, which I find overwhelming. However, the good easily outweighs the bad. Once you get past the learning curve, Van Helsing is a ton of fun. The core mechanics of the game, melee combat and shooting, work flawlessly. I have yet to play a game where the auto-aim is this good. Between you changing directions and the game intuitively aiming at the most dangerous foe and quickly cycling to the next one upon death, it just doesn't get much better than this. And Van Helsing does another thing many other brawlers failed to accomplish during this generation. It keeps simple combat interesting as the game progresses. For one, the weapon upgrades are awesome, but not overwhelming. The additional firepower allows you to try different strategies, learning enemy and boss weaknesses, and progress nicely with the ever-increasing difficulty of the enemies themselves. Add in the alternate ammunition, and you are left with a very engaging combat experience. Van Helsing also gets a ton of little things correct. For one, the level layouts are extremely logical, and I never once got lost, nor did I have to consult a guide because I was stuck. This isn't because the game is too easy or simple, it's because the level design actually makes sense. Areas of the world are inaccessible until you upgrade your weapons, adding a bit of a Metrovania type of feel. Next, the game gives you unlimited ammo. This means no hunting around looking for things. Instead, the smooth, responsive combat is always front and center. If you want to hunt around for eggs or secret glyphs, you certainly can, but this is purely optional instead of forced upon you, which I appreciate immensely. The lack of collecting and unlimited ammo keeps the action moving at a breakneck pace, which mixes perfectly with the stylized violence. While I haven't seen the film or played Devil May Cry, Van Helsing actually reminds me of a few other pieces of pop culture. The whole atmosphere reminds me of the film Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which is an awesome vampire flick, as well as Castlevania with the plethora of classic movie monsters. I also find the 5-hour runtime to be just about perfect. It's enough time to have a thoughtful story with a plot twist, but not too much time where the simple gameplay elements overstay their welcome. The shorter length also means I'll probably revisit the game, as you can play through it while retaining all of your weapons and upgrades, and finish finding all of the secret glyphs and eggs. So yeah, Van Helsing the video game is definitely underrated. This isn't some mediocre title cashing in on the success of a mediocre film. This is a fantastic video game. It's well made, stylistic, sounds terrific, looks nice, and plays even better. If you're a fan of old school brawlers or just looking for a fun third-person action title, give Van Helsing a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.